Hi friends, so today's topic is difference between SQL and NoSQL. So today we'll learn these two concepts. So let's get started. First is what is SQL? So SQL basically stands for the structured query language, and it is a standard language which is used in relational management database system. When I say relational management database system, I mean to say that data stored in the form of tables. Okay, so all the type of the RDBMS which stores the data in a table, for that structured query language will be used to retrieve the data. Okay, relational, we can have a multiple type of the relational database like MS SQL, like Microsoft SQL Server, which is provided by the Microsoft, then MySQL, then Oracle, Sysbase. So these are the different type of the relational database, and in this type of the database, the language which is used, the programming language which is used to store, retrieve and update data inside the database is the SQL. Okay, structured query language. Now we understood the SQL. Now what is NoSQL? NoSQL stands for not only SQL or not SQL, we can say. It is basically used for distributed system having no fixed data storage format. Means data can be stored in files, in documents, in key value pairs, in other formats other than form of tables. So it is basically used for the distributed systems. Okay, distributed database like big data or real-time web applications use NoSQL. When I say real-time web applications, like the companies like Twitter, Facebook, Google's are receiving millions of data every single day. So this type of the huge data will be we cannot store in RDBMS, because the data is not structured data. You can receive semi-structured or unstructured, so we need to store this huge amount of data which is coming from the social networking sites, like in somewhere. So that's where the NoSQL will come into the picture. Okay, so basically, if somebody asks you what is the difference between SQL and NoSQL, so you can say that traditional RDBMS uses SQL language to store and retrieve data, whereas NoSQL database systems uses the wide range of database technologies that can store structured, semi-structured, unstructured data. Okay, the data which is stored in NoSQL is basically, it's not very complex. Okay, it is just the main intent or main intention of NoSQL is to store the data, huge amount of data, so that the data will be scalable, because we are receiving millions or trillions of comments of users comments, you can say, on social networking sites. So we want a database where they can store this huge data. Okay, so key differences between SQL and NoSQL. If we talk about structure wise, so SQL uses the RDBMS, in which the data stored in the form of table, where NoSQL stored the data in many forms like data, documents, key value pairs, unstructured format. If we talk about ACID principle is atomic, atomicity, consistency. C stands for consistency, I stands for and D stands for durability, I stands for isolation. So the ACID principle is like the data which is stored in SQL Server they should comply with ACID principle. That means the data stored should be atomic, should be consistent, it should not be inconsistent, it should be isolated, and it should be durable enough so that the data will not be lost in case of the server failure. So this is the principle which is followed by the SQL Server or RDBMS database very strictly. But in the case of NoSQL, this is not like that. We only focus to store the data. Okay, you can have the it is not compliant with the ACID principle as such. Then we talk about complex queries. As the SQL is good fit for complex query, whereas NoSQL is not. Why? Because we have stored the data in SQL in structure in form of we have the we have the constraint and relationship among the tables, so that is why we can get the data from multiple tables using the joins and all. So we can perform a complex query to get the desired data in SQL, but it is not in the case of NoSQL. You have a streamlined data. You do not have you do not have any constraints. You do not have any foreign key constraint, primary key constraint, table constraint, default. So any type of the rules you do not have NoSQL. So that is why in NoSQL complex query you cannot write a complex query to retrieve the data. Then we talk about the scalability. It is a very important criteria to distinguish these two terms. Scalability means how much the data will be scalable, or how much the database will be expandable when you are receiving the data. The SQL is a vertical scalable, whereas NoSQL is horizontally scalable, hence provides a high degree of scalability. This is the point where NoSQL is has a benefit over the SQL, because it is horizontal scalable. I'll tell you what is vertical and horizontal scalable. Vertical scaling means adding more resource to the existing machine, whereas horizontal scaling means adding more machine to handle the data. So vertical scaling is not that easy to implement, but horizontal scaling is very easy to implement. So that is why NoSQL has a bigger benefit as compared to the SQL when we talk about the scalability factor. Then the database. For example, SQL uses the Microsoft SQL server, whereas NoSQL uses the MongoDB, which is quite very famous nowadays because of the social networking sites. MongoDB is very famous. And when we talk about the SQL, then Microsoft SQL server, which is provided by the Microsoft, is very famous database. Now the question arises, we know the SQL, okay, then when to use the NoSQL? See criteria on the basis of it you can decide we need to use the NoSQL. When huge amount of data need to be stored and retrieved, the relationship between the data you store is not that important. The data changing over the time and is not structured. Okay, support of constraint and join is not required at database level. Data is growing continuously, like I have given example of Twitter and Facebook. The data is growing continuously and you need to scale the database regular to handle the data. Okay, so if this is the requirement of in that case you can use the NoSQL database. You can choose the NoSQL database as compared to so much. I hope you understand the key differences.